Welcome to Calvin's Stories, where a man who built everything refuses to be erased. Enjoy.
My name is Shaquille Hartman. I'm 49 years old, and on a Tuesday in October, 14 months after I buried my wife, I stood in the parking lot of St. Mary's Hospital in Richmond, Virginia, holding a billing statement that said I no longer existed. The clerk inside had looked up at me with the patient confusion of a woman trying to be kind to someone she believed was confused. "Sir," she said, "your daughter already settled this. She presented your death certificate yesterday." I asked her to say it again. She said it again. The asphalt under my boots was warm from a sun that had no business being warm in October, and somewhere between the automatic doors and my truck, I understood that my own child had walked into a government office and signed a piece of paper that erased me. I didn't cry. I didn't fall. I sat down on the curb beside a planter full of dead marigolds, and I thought about my wife, Renata, who had died in our bedroom on a Sunday morning in August of the year before, and I asked her out loud what I was supposed to do now. The cardinal that landed on the hospital sign didn't answer. But somewhere, she had already answered. I just didn't know it yet. Before I tell you what I found in the attic, and what my wife had been doing behind my back during the last months of her life to protect me from the daughter we raised together, I want to ask you something simple. If this story is already pulling at something inside you, if you have ever loved someone who used your grief as a doorway into your life so they could rob it, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and drop one word in the comments. Just one. The name of the person you wish had warned you sooner. Because this channel is for the people who got told they were imagining things until the paperwork proved they weren't. We tell the stories the family albums leave out. We sit with the grief that doesn't make it into the eulogy. And tonight, I'm going to tell you mine. Because somebody told me once that a story you don't speak is a story that eats you from the inside. So I'm speaking. To understand how I ended up on that curb, you have to go back to the 7 months I spent watching my wife die. Renata was diagnosed in the January before the August she died. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, the kind of sentence that doesn't come with appeals. I was a master electrician then, and I'm a master electrician now. 30 years on the trucks, hands that have wired half the new construction on the south side of Richmond. The day the oncologist explained what we were looking at, I walked out of his office, called my foreman Ray, and told him I was taking unpaid leave starting the next morning. Ray said, "Take whatever you need, brother." I took 7 months. I spent every dollar of the $18,000 I had in savings on the hospice nurse who came 3 days a week, on the hospital bed we put in the living room, because Renata wanted to see the bird feeder, on the morphine pump and the special pillows and the protein shakes she could barely keep down. I held her hand through nights that didn't end and mornings that came too soon. And on the 11th of August at 5:47 in the morning, with the cardinal she always called our visitor sitting on the porch railing outside, she took one breath and didn't take another. I kept holding her hand for a long time after. Our daughter Brianna was 26 then. She'd been living in Charlotte, working some kind of marketing job that she never quite explained, and she came up for the last 2 weeks. She slept in her old room. She didn't help much with the nursing. She said she couldn't bear to see her mother that way. But she sat at the kitchen table and she cried, and I held her too, because that's what a father does. At the funeral, she stood beside me in a black dress, and she gripped my arm so hard I had bruises the next day. Gloria Pace, my wife's college roommate, and the funeral home director who handled the service, did everything for free. Gloria had dressed Renata's body herself. She had brushed her hair the way Renata used to brush it. At the graveside, Gloria held my other hand and she said, "Shaq, you don't have to be strong today. You just have to stand here." So I stood there. Brianna stood on my left. Gloria stood on my right. And we put my wife in the ground under a maple tree she would have loved. After the funeral, I went back to work. Double shifts when I could get them, because the savings were gone, and the mortgage didn't care that I was widowed. The house felt wrong without Renata in it. Her coat still hung by the back door. Her reading glasses still sat on the nightstand. I'd walk into the kitchen at 6 a.m. expecting to smell the coffee she always made before I got up, and the silence would knock the wind out of me all over again. There's a particular weight to a house where one voice is permanently missing. You don't get used to it. You just learn to carry it. I learned to carry it. I made my own coffee. I packed my own lunch. I drove to the job site, and I climbed into attics and crawl spaces, and I pulled wire, and I came home and I ate something out of a can, and I went to bed alone in the bedroom where my wife had died. That was my life. That was what 14 months of widowhood looked like for me. Flat, heavy, colorless. The kind of grief that doesn't perform, the kind that just sits. About 6 weeks after the funeral, Brianna called. She said she wanted to come home for a while. She said she was struggling with Mom's death, and she didn't want to grieve alone in Charlotte, and she thought maybe we could grieve together. She said it that way. Grieve together. And it sounded like the right thing. It sounded like family. I told her, of course. I told her her room was still her room. She showed up on a Friday with 2 suitcases and a small dog she'd gotten somewhere along the way. And she hugged me at the door and she cried into my shoulder and she said, "Dad, I've missed you so much." I believed her. Why wouldn't I have believed her? She was my daughter. The first weeks were almost good. She cooked. She made Renata's lasagna recipe one Sunday, and we ate it together, and I had to leave the table because the smell of the basil was too much. Brianna followed me into the hallway, and she rubbed my back, and she said, "I know, Daddy." I know. She called me Daddy then. She hadn't called me that since she was 12. Looking back, the first thing she changed was the mail. I noticed because I'm a man who gets the mail at the same time every day, 4:15, on my way in from the truck. But suddenly the box was empty when I checked it, and Brianna would say, "Oh, I grabbed it earlier. It's on the counter." And there'd be a stack of grocery store flyers and nothing else. No bank statements, no credit card bills, no insurance correspondence. I didn't think about it then. I thought my daughter was being helpful. I thought, my God, I have help. I have someone in this house who cares. The relief of that, after 14 months of carrying the silence alone, made me stupid. I want to say that clearly, because I think there are men listening to this who have been made stupid by relief. You go so long without being cared for that the first hint of care turns off the part of your brain that asks questions. Brianna knew that. She was counting on it. The next thing she did was harder to see. She started calling my friends, old guys from the union, the foreman Ray, even Renata's mother down in Petersburg. I'd hear her on the phone in the other room, her voice low and concerned, saying things like, "I'm just worried about him. You know how he is. He doesn't ask for help. He's been drinking more than usual. I don't think he should be on the roof. I caught him crying in the garage last week." None of it was true. I drink a beer on Friday nights, and that's it. I haven't been on a roof in 2 years. I'm a master electrician. I run the crew now. But she was building a picture, and the people she was talking to were starting to see it. Renata's mother stopped calling. I called her once, and she was distant in a way she'd never been before. And when I asked if everything was okay, she said, "Shaquille, Brianna told me you don't want to visit me anymore. And I just want you to know I understand. Grief is different for everyone." I tried to tell her that wasn't true. I tried to say I had been planning to drive down on Sunday. But she had already decided what kind of son-in-law I was now. And I couldn't unsay what Brianna had said. I lost my wife's mother that month. I lost her quietly, without a fight. And I didn't even know I'd lost her until much later. Ray was next. My foreman, my friend, the man who hired me at 26 and who I'd worked beside for 23 years. Ray started pulling me off the overtime list. He did it gradually, like he didn't want me to notice. I'd come in expecting to be on the Saturday crew, and I wouldn't be on the schedule. I'd ask, and he'd shrug and say, "Slow week, brother. I'll get you on next time." But next time wouldn't come. My paycheck dropped by $1,400 a month. When I finally cornered him at the truck on a Wednesday and asked him straight up what was going on, he wouldn't meet my eyes. He said, "Shaq, I just want you to take care of yourself first. All right?" I said, "What does that mean?" He said, "Your daughter's worried about you, man. She says you've been hitting the bottle. I just don't want anything happening on a live panel." And I stood there in the parking lot with my lunchbox in my hand, and I understood for the first time that my daughter was telling people things about me that weren't true, and they were believing her. I went home that night. Brianna had made dinner. Pot roast. She smiled at me across the table and asked about my day, and for a reason I couldn't name, I locked my bedroom door that night for the first time in my adult life. I want to pause here and tell you about Renata, because I haven't told you enough about her yet, and you need to know who she was before you can understand what she did. Renata Hartman was a high school librarian. She wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She laughed with her whole body, head thrown back, hand on her chest, the kind of laugh that made strangers smile in restaurants. She kept index cards in every cookbook with her own notes on the recipes. More garlic, less salt. Shaq doesn't like cumin. Double the cinnamon for Brianna's birthday. She planted a garden every spring, even though half of what she planted died. And she said it didn't matter because the trying was the prayer. She called the cardinal that came to our feeder our visitor, and she'd tap on the window and say, "Good morning" to it, like it could hear her. She used to read me passages from books she loved at night, in bed, her voice slow and careful, and I would fall asleep to the sound of her reading, and that was the best sleep of my life. I have not slept that well since. I will not sleep that well again. That's the deal you make when you bury the person who was the rhythm of your nights. Renata loved Brianna with a fierceness I sometimes didn't understand. Brianna was difficult as a teenager. Secretive, sharp-tongued, quick to take and slow to give. Renata defended her every time. She said, "She's finding herself, Shaq." She said, "You have to love." The most when they deserve it the least. She believed that. She really did. But there were also moments, and I didn't see them at the time. I see them now, when Renata would watch Brianna leave a room, and her face would go quiet in a way I didn't recognize. Like she was looking at her daughter and seeing something she didn't want to see. I asked her once what she was thinking. She said nothing, and she changed the subject. I let her change it. I should have asked again. I didn't know then that she was already making arrangements. I didn't know that her quiet face was the face of a woman who had stopped hoping her daughter would become someone different and had started preparing the ground for what would happen when she was gone. I learned that later. I learned it from the cedar box. The first time I heard about the cedar box was the week Brianna moved in. She was unpacking in her old room, and she called down the stairs, "Hey, Dad, what's this thing in the attic?" I climbed up the pull-down ladder, and she was crouched by the eave with a flashlight, pointing at a box I didn't recognize. Cedar, about the size of a bread loaf, dark and oiled, with a brass latch. I'd never seen it. Brianna said, "It has Mom's handwriting on the tag, look." The tag said, in Renata's slanted script, "For Shaq, when you're ready." I sat down on the attic floor and I put my hand on the box and I couldn't open it. I just couldn't. I told Brianna I'd get to it eventually. I told her to leave it where it was. She said, "Sure, Dad. Of course." She was very gentle about it. I climbed back down the ladder and I didn't think about the box again for months. I should have opened it that day. If I had opened it that day, I would have saved myself a lot of what came next. But I wasn't ready. Grief makes you a coward about certain doors, and I was a coward about that one. Brianna, I now know, went back up to the attic that same night, and every night for weeks after, looking for the latch she didn't know how to pick. The contamination escalated through the fall. I started noticing things on my phone. Accounts I didn't recognize in my banking app. Transactions I hadn't made. Alerts for cards I'd never applied for. When I asked Brianna about it, she'd say, "Oh, Dad, that's probably just a scam email. Don't click anything. Let me handle it." And she'd take my phone and tap at it and hand it back, and the alerts would be gone. I didn't know she was deleting them. I didn't know she had set up forwarding rules in my email account that sent every financial notification to a folder I never checked. I didn't know my bank statements were going to a P.O. box in Henrico County that she'd opened in my name, with a copy of my driver's license she'd photographed while I was in the shower. I didn't know any of it. I was working 60 hours a week, eating dinner with my daughter, going to bed early, and I was being dismantled in slow motion, paper by paper, signature by signature, while I slept in the room my wife had died in. Then came the doctor's office. I had a regular physical scheduled at the VA. I'm not a veteran, but my doctor moved his practice there, and when I arrived, the receptionist told me I needed to wait for a consult with the on-call psychiatrist before any prescriptions could be refilled. I said, "Excuse me." She said, "Sir, your file has a flag. A family member called expressing concern about suicidal ideation and medication hoarding, and per protocol, we need an evaluation before we release any controlled substances." I sat in that waiting room for 4 hours. The psychiatrist who finally saw me was a young woman with kind eyes and a clipboard. And she asked me questions about whether I wanted to harm myself, whether I'd been collecting pills, whether I'd written any goodbye letters. I sat across from her and I tried to answer honestly, and I felt the heat rising in my face because I knew who had made that call. After 40 minutes, she put her clipboard down and she said, "Mr. Hartman, I'm going to clear you. You are not suicidal. You are a grieving widower with a job and a mortgage and a daughter who appears to be misinformed. I want you to think very carefully about who is making decisions in your life right now." I thanked her. I walked out to my truck. I sat in the driver's seat for 20 minutes, and I couldn't make my hands work the keys. If somebody you love has ever made you prove you're sane just for asking questions, if you've ever sat in a beige room with a stranger holding a clipboard, defending the most ordinary parts of your own mind, while the person who put you there was at home cooking your dinner, you're not paranoid. You're paying attention. You're noticing the pattern that the people around you are too polite to name. Tell me in the comments. If you've been there, what finally made you trust yourself again? What was the moment? Because I'm going to tell you mine. Mine was a billing clerk at a hospital in Richmond, Virginia, telling me my own death certificate had already been filed. But before that, there was one more humiliation Brianna engineered, and I have to tell you about it because it broke something in me that needed to break. 2 weeks after the psychiatric evaluation, I was on a job site in Short Pump, wiring out a new dental office, and a woman in a cardigan walked through the unfinished doorway, carrying a leather folder. She asked for Shaquille Hartman. My crew turned and looked at me. I came down off the ladder. She introduced herself as a caseworker from Adult Protective Services, and she said she was responding to a wellness check request filed by my daughter. She said her name. She said the date of the request. She said it in front of my apprentice, my journeyman, and the general contractor. She asked if there was somewhere private we could talk. We went out to the parking lot, and I stood next to her sedan, and I answered her questions, and she watched me, and slowly her face changed. She set her clipboard down on the hood of her car very slowly. She said, "Mr. Hartman, can I be honest with you?" She said, "The person who filed this request described a man who is bedridden, incoherent, and refusing food." She said, "That is not who I am looking at." She said, "I'm going to close this case today, but I want you to consider whether the person who filed it has your best interests at heart." I shook her hand. I went back inside. My crew didn't ask. My foreman pretended he hadn't seen, but I knew, by the way, none of them would look at me for the rest of that day, that something had ended. I drove home that night, and Brianna had made my favorite, country fried steak with white gravy, and she kissed my cheek, and she said, "I just want us to be okay, Dad. I just want us to be okay." I ate the steak. I didn't taste it. I went upstairs and I locked my door again. The hospital visit came 3 days later. I had a follow-up appointment with my primary care, just routine blood work, and I stopped at the billing window on my way out to update my insurance card. The clerk pulled up my account. Her face did a thing I've seen before on people who realize they're standing on the edge of something they don't understand. She tilted her head. She typed. She said, "Sir, your daughter already settled this. She presented your death certificate yesterday. She presented your, And she stopped because she saw my face. And she understood, even before I understood, that something was very wrong. I asked her to print whatever she was looking at. She printed it. It was a benefits termination notice referencing a certified death certificate filed with the state of Virginia, Department of Vital Records, dated 2 days prior. The cause of death listed was cardiac arrest. The signing physician was a doctor I'd never heard of. I folded the paper in half. I walked out the sliding doors. I sat down on the curb next to the dead marigolds, and I called Gloria Pace. Gloria answered on the second ring. I said, "Gloria, my daughter has declared me dead." There was a silence on the other end of the line, and then Gloria said, "Shaq, where are you?" I told her. She said, "Don't move. I'm coming." She drove from the funeral home in 20 minutes, and when she pulled up in her old gray Buick, she got out and she walked over to where I was sitting, and she sat down on the curb beside me, and she put her arm around my shoulders, and she said, "Sweetheart, I need to tell you something. I was at First National Bank yesterday morning, depositing the offering for the church I do funerals for. I was standing in line, and I saw your daughter at the counter. She was handing the teller a piece of paper. I couldn't see the paper, but I saw the teller's face change, and I saw the teller pick up the phone and call a manager. And I heard the manager say the words insurance disbursement and beneficiary. I almost said something. I almost walked up to that counter. But Brianna turned around before I could move, and she saw me and she smiled at me, and she waved. Shaq. She waved at me like nothing was wrong, and I lost my nerve. I didn't call you. I went home, and I sat with it all night, and I told myself, I was imagining things. I'm so sorry. I should have called you. I should have called the police right there at the counter. I should have. Gloria was crying. I had never seen Gloria cry. I'd seen her bury 30 people, including my wife, and I had never seen her cry. I put my hand on her hand. I said, "You're calling now." "That's enough. That's enough, Gloria." I drove home that afternoon and Brianna wasn't there. The dog was, but she wasn't. I climbed up the pull-down ladder to the attic, and I crawled across the joists in the dim light. And I found the cedar box where I'd left it 8 months before. I sat down on the attic floor, and I held it in my lap. My hands were shaking. They were shaking the way they used to shake when Renata was first diagnosed, that fine tremor that I couldn't make stop. I pressed my thumb against the brass latch. It clicked open. The smell that came out of that box was the smell of my wife's hope chest, the cedar she'd kept her wedding dress in, the cedar she'd kept the blanket she crocheted for Brianna in, the cedar that was the smell of every important thing she'd ever wanted to protect. I lifted the lid. Inside the box, arranged with the careful neatness that was Renata in everything she did, was a small black USB drive in a plastic sleeve, a manila envelope sealed with red tape, a folded handwritten note on her stationery, the cream paper, with the small printed daisy in the corner, the stationery she used for the letters she wrote to her mother every Sunday, and underneath all of it, a second envelope, thicker, with my name on the front in her handwriting, and underneath my name, in slightly smaller letters, the words read this last. I opened the manila envelope first. Inside were notarized documents, a second life insurance policy from a company I'd never heard of, taken out in the March before Renata was diagnosed, with a face value of $220,000 and a single beneficiary listed Shaquille Andrew Hartman Soul. A revocation of power of attorney for one Brianna Renata Hartman, dated and notarized 6 months before Renata died. A letter to the attorney of record, Helen Pace. Gloria's older sister, I realized then, the lawyer Renata had used for her will, instructing her to release a sealed packet to me upon my personal request. A photocopy of Renata's actual last will and testament, the one that had never been read at any meeting I'd attended, the one I'd been told didn't exist because she died too sick to update it. The will left everything to me. Everything. The house. The savings account I didn't know she had. At a credit union in Williamsburg. A mutual fund worth $31,000. And at the bottom of the will, in a typed clause, I read 4 times before I could believe it, the words, "My daughter Brianna has received her share, in love and patience, and I have no further obligations to her financial ambitions." I sat on the attic floor and I picked up the handwritten note. It was short. It read, Shaq. She asked me to change the beneficiary 3 times while I was sick. I said yes each time, and I changed it back each time. The real documents are with Helen Pace, my attorney. The USB has a voicemail I left for Helen 8 months before I died. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you what our daughter is. I love you. I will love you from wherever I am. Open the second envelope when you can breathe. R. I couldn't breathe. I sat there for a long time. I held the note against my chest. The cardinal that had been on the feeder outside the attic vent for years made its little chip sound somewhere out in the trees, and I realized I was making a sound too. A small, low sound I'd never heard myself make. And I let it come out of me. I let the cedar smell fill my head. I let the sound come. When I could breathe again, I plugged the USB drive into my laptop downstairs. There was one audio file. I clicked it. The first thing I heard was the small mechanical scrape of Renata clearing her throat, that specific little sound she made before she said something important. And then her voice. Weaker than I remembered, but hers. "Helen," she said, "this is Renata. It's the 18th of December. The doctor says I have maybe 9-10 months if we're lucky. I need you to keep this on file. If anything feels wrong after I'm gone, if Shaq calls you and he sounds confused, if money starts moving, if anything about the insurance comes up that doesn't match what I'm setting up with you today, I need you to do exactly what I'm about to tell you. Tell him about the cedar box in the attic. Tell him to open it. I protected him because he won't protect himself. He's a soft man, Helen." He raised her soft. He'll let her take everything because he won't believe she'd ask. So I'm setting it up so she can't. I'm sorry I'm putting this on you. I'm sorry I'm putting this on him, but I know my daughter. I know her better than he does, and I'd rather be wrong from the grave than right from a hospital bed where I can't stop her. Thank you, Helen. Tell your sister I love her. Tell Shaq I'll be the cardinal. The file ended. I closed the laptop. I sat at the kitchen table in the house where my wife had died, and I understood that she had been working from the other side of her own death to keep me alive. I opened the second envelope at the kitchen table. The letter inside was 4 pages long, written in her slanted, careful hand on the cream stationery with the daisy in the corner. I want to tell you what she wrote, because every word of it is engraved on the inside of my skull, and I will carry them until the day I follow her. Shaq, she wrote. My Shaq. If you're reading this, then something has gone wrong and you've found your way to the box. And I'm so sorry that the first thing I have to do is confirm what you've already started to suspect. Our daughter is not who we hoped she would be. I knew this before I got sick. I think I knew it when she was 19, and the credit card came back to our house with charges I had to pay quietly so you wouldn't see. I think I knew it when she came home from college for Christmas the year she was 22. And 3 of my pieces of jewelry went back with her to Charlotte. I never told you. I told myself she was struggling. I told myself love would fix it. I'm sorry. I should have told you. We should have faced it together. I left you alone with it because I couldn't bear to see your face when you finally believed me. That was cowardice, my love, and it was the only real cowardice of my life. And I am sorry. I stopped reading. I had to. I put the page down on the table, and I pressed both my hands flat against the wood, and I felt the grain of it against my palms. And I let myself cry the way I had not cried at her funeral, the way I had not cried at the grave, the way I had not cried in 14 months of widowhood. I cried for the woman who had carried this alone. I cried because she had been alone with it, and I hadn't seen. I cried because she was right. I would have refused to believe her. I would have defended Brianna. I would have made her grief worse by making her fight me for the truth. She knew that. She had chosen to spare me, and the cost of that sparing had been her own loneliness in the last years of our marriage. I picked the letter back up. I kept reading. When you got sick taking care of me, and you will get sick, Shaq, you take care of everyone but yourself, Brianna will come back. She'll say she wants to grieve with you. She doesn't. She wants the insurance. She wants the house. She wants the workshop equipment. She's already asked me 3 separate times during my chemo to change the beneficiary on the policy to her name. Each time I said yes because I was too tired to fight, and each time I called Helen the next morning and changed it back. She doesn't know about the second policy. She doesn't know about the credit union account. She doesn't know about the workshop apartment. Yes, the workshop apartment. You didn't know either. I leased it in both our names 18 months ago because I had a feeling. My love, I had a feeling. And I wanted you to have somewhere to go that wasn't this house, if you ever needed it. The keys are in the kitchen drawer with the rubber bands. The lease is in this envelope. Go there if you need to. Go there now if you found this in time. I read on. She named the people. She named Ray. She said, Brianna will go to Ray first because Ray is the one who can cut your income, and she'll tell him you're drinking, and Ray is a good man, but he is a cautious man, and he will believe a young woman crying in his office. She said she will try to reach my mother and turn her against you, because my mother is your last connection to me, and Brianna knows that. She said she will eventually do something with the insurance that crosses a legal line, because she does not understand consequences the way other people understand them. She has never understood them. We should have made her understand them when she was small, and we did not. She named Derek, boyfriend, the notary. She said, the boyfriend is the dangerous one, Shock. He has the stamp is the weapon, watch for the stamp. She had written this 7 months before her death. She had named Derek by name, the boyfriend who would in fact stamp the fraudulent transfer of my truck title and my workshop equipment into Brianna's name to the tune of $74,000. She had seen him coming. She had seen all of it coming. The next page was the part that broke me and remade me. Shaq, she wrote, I need you to hear something. I should have said more when I was alive. You are not soft. You are not weak. You are not the man Brianna will try to convince everyone you are. You are the man who carried me up the stairs when I couldn't walk anymore. You are the man who learned to braid my hair when I lost the strength in my arms. You are the man who held my hand for 6 hours. Straight the night I was afraid I was going to die before morning, and you did not let go, and I did not die that night because of the heat of your hand. You are the strongest person I have ever known. The reason Brianna can move against you is not that you are weak. It is that you are loyal. Loyalty looks like weakness only to people who have never been loved by a loyal man. I have been loved by you for 27 years, and I know the difference. Do not let her, or anyone she has poisoned, tell you that your loyalty was the flaw. Your loyalty was the gift. It was the gift she did not deserve and could not return. That is not a failure of yours. That is a failure of hers. I want to give you permission, my love, for the things I know you will not give yourself. You have permission to stop saving her. You have permission to let her face what she has built. You have permission to grieve me without grieving her at the same time. And you have permission to grieve her without feeling like you are betraying her. Because the daughter you are grieving is the one we hoped for. And the woman you are letting go of is the one she chose to become. Those are two different people. Both griefs are real. Carry both. You have permission to take the money I left you and to use it without guilt. Buy yourself a good chair, take a trip, fix the porch, hire someone to do the things I always did. You have permission to live, Shaq. To really live. Not as a memorial to me, as yourself. The cardinal will come. I'll send the cardinal. When you see it, know it's me telling you I am proud of you, and that I see you, and that I always did. I love you. I will love you from wherever I am. R. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time after I finished the letter. The light in the kitchen shifted from afternoon yellow to evening blue, and I did not move. The dog came in and put her head on my knee, and I did not move. At some point, I heard Brianna's car in the driveway. I heard her key in the door. I heard her call out, "Dad, I picked up Thai food, your favorite." I did not answer. I folded the letter back into its envelope. I folded the note. I closed the cedar box. I took the box, the keys to the workshop apartment from the drawer with the rubber bands, my wallet, my phone, and the clothes I was wearing, and I walked out the back door while she was setting the table in the dining room. And I got in my truck, and I drove away. I did not come back. I have not been back since. The workshop apartment was on the second floor of a converted brick building off Carey Street, above the small electrical supply shop where I sometimes bought parts. Renata had leased it 18 months before her diagnosis. The landlord was an old Polish man named Stanislaw, who handed me a second set of keys and said, "Your wife was a beautiful woman. Your wife paid 2 years of rent up front. Your wife said you might come one day. Here are clean sheets." I sat on the bed she had made up for me, and I cried again. The window faced east. There was a fire escape outside the window. There was a small cast iron pan on the stove that I recognized from our first apartment together in 1996. She had moved it here. She had moved it here for me. I called Helen Pace the next morning. Helen knew my voice before I gave my name. She said, "Shaquille, I have been waiting for this call for 14 months. She said, "Come to my office today. Bring identification. Bring the documents from the box." I went. Helen was a small woman in her 60s with iron gray hair and the same direct eyes as her sister Gloria. She had a file on her desk that was 4 inches thick. She walked me through everything. The second policy was real and active, and the carrier was waiting for my claim. The credit union account had been earning quiet interest for years. The workshop apartment lease was good through the end of the following year. The revocation of Brianna's power of attorney had been filed with 3 banks, 2 credit reporting agencies, and the Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles. Renata had been busy. Renata had been very busy. Helen looked at me across the desk and she said, Your wife loved you in a way I have not often seen in this office, Shaquille. I see a lot of wills in this office. Most of them are about money. Hers was about you. She wanted you to know that. I told her I knew. I told her I knew now. Helen called the police while I was sitting there. She called the insurance company. She called the bank where Brianna had attempted the disbursement. She called the credit card companies. She called the doctor's office that had flagged me. She called Ray. Within 72 hours, every system Brianna had hijacked had begun requesting verification she could not provide. The insurance company demanded in-person identification of the deceased, me, and she could not produce one. The credit cards froze. Adult Protective Services closed the case after a follow-up call confirmed I was coherent, employed, and now legally represented. Derek's notary license was flagged for review, and a detective from the Henrico County Financial Crimes Unit went to his apartment and showed him a folder with 14 documents bearing his stamp on transfers he had no authorization to notarize. Derek, faced with the loss of his license and felony charges, took less than 48 hours to flip on Brianna. He gave them everything. The forged death certificate, purchased online from a site that specializes in novelty documents, the email chain where Brianna had instructed him on which transfers to stamp, the screenshots of her bank logins, the voicemail she had left him 3 weeks before, the voicemail Helen later played for me in her office, the voicemail the phone company's fraud department had pulled, in which my daughter's voice said, "He still thinks I moved home because I miss Mom. He doesn't even check the mail anymore. By the time he figures it out, we'll be in Costa Rica and he'll be too embarrassed to call the police on his own kid." I listened to that voicemail in Helen's office. Helen sat across from me and watched my face. When it ended, I sat very still. I did not cry. I'd cried for my wife. I'd cried for the daughter I thought I had. I did not have any tears left for the daughter who actually existed. Helen said, "Are you all right?" I said, "Helen, I think I'm going to be all right. I think for the first time in 14 months I'm going to be all right." Brianna was arrested at Richmond International Airport 8 days later, holding 2 one-way tickets to San Jose, Costa Rica, dated for the following morning. Derek had told the detectives about the tickets. The detectives had asked airport security to flag her name. She was charged with insurance fraud, forgery of a public record, identity theft, and conspiracy. She called me from the holding facility. I did not answer. She left a voicemail saying, "Daddy, please, you have to help me. This is a misunderstanding. Please call me back. Please." I deleted the voicemail. I did not call her back. The next day, she called again. I did not answer. The day after, she had her court-appointed attorney call me to discuss a possible plea arrangement that might involve restitution from a hypothetical loan from her father. I told the attorney, very politely, that there would be no loan and no contact, and that all future communications should go through Helen Pace. The attorney said he understood. He sounded tired. He had probably had this conversation before with other fathers, in other cases. I hung up the phone and I went to the window of the workshop apartment, and the cardinal was on the fire escape rail. The same cardinal, or a different one. They are all the same one in the end. In the weeks after the arrest, Brianna's mother, my mother-in-law, called me. She was crying. She said, "Shaq, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I believed her. I believed her instead of you. I should have called you. I should have driven up there. I told her it was all right." I drove down to Petersburg the next Sunday, and I sat in her living room, and I held her hand, and we talked about Renata for 3 hours. She showed me photographs I had not seen of Renata as a girl, of Renata at 14 with a science fair ribbon. I left at sundown with a tin of her shortbread cookies and a promise to come every other Sunday. I have kept that promise. Renata's mother is in my life again. Brianna gave her back to me by losing her. There is a strange accounting in these things that I do not pretend to understand. Ray came to the workshop apartment one evening with a six-pack and an apology. He sat on my one good chair and he could not look at me. He said, Shaq, I should have asked you. I should have asked you to your face. I let your daughter tell me a story, and I did not check it against 23 years of you. I am sorry. I told him I forgave him. I told him I needed him to put me back on the overtime list and to never speak of it again. He did. We worked a Saturday together 2 weeks later, just the two of us, wiring out a new restaurant in Scott's Addition, and we did not speak of Brianna once. That is how men forgive each other when they have known each other long enough. The work is the forgiveness. The insurance disbursement on Renata's first policy was reversed when the fraud was confirmed. The second policy, the one she had hidden in the cedar box for me, paid out 41 days after I filed. $220,000 wired directly into my new account at the credit union in Williamsburg, the one Helen helped me open, the same week as the arrest. I did not touch the money for 2 months. I just looked at the balance. I let the fact of it settle into my chest. Then I paid off the house. Then I paid off the truck. Then I replaced the workshop equipment Brianna and Derek had transferred out of my name, which I bought back at auction for considerably less than they had valued it at on the forged transfer documents. Then I bought a good chair, like Renata told me to. A leather recliner the color of dark honey. I put it in the workshop apartment by the east window. The cardinal lands on the fire escape most mornings, and I drink my coffee and I watch it, and I say good morning out loud. And I do not feel foolish anymore. Brianna took a plea deal 6 months after her arrest. 3 years in a state facility, restitution scheduled over 20 years that she will almost certainly never complete. She wrote me a letter from the facility 2 months in. It was 4 pages long. It was full of explanations and reframings and a careful narrative in which she had been overwhelmed by grief and made a series of small mistakes that had cascaded out of her control. There was an apology in the 3rd paragraph of the 2nd page that lasted 2 sentences. The rest of the letter was about her. I read it once. I did not write back. Helen told me I had no legal obligation to respond, and I knew I had no emotional obligation to respond either, because my wife had given me permission in the letter from the cedar box. You have permission to let her face what she has built. I am letting her face it. That is the only love I have left for her. The hard kind. The kind that does not rescue. I moved back into the house on Monument Avenue last spring. I had Stanislaw rent the workshop apartment to a young couple who needed it more than I did, but he kept it in both our names, mine and Renata's, at the lease level, because he is a sentimental old man, and he understood. I cleaned out the house with Gloria's help. We boxed up the things that needed to be boxed. We kept the things that needed to be kept. Renata's coat still hangs by the back door. I have decided it will hang there until I die. The reading glasses are still on the nightstand. The recipe cards are still in the cookbooks. The bird feeder gets refilled every Sunday morning, and the cardinal comes, and I am pretty sure it is the same cardinal, and I am pretty sure it is her, and I do not feel foolish about that either. I had Renata's last will and testament read aloud one afternoon in Helen's office. Just the 3 of us, me, Helen, and Gloria. It was a small ceremony. Helen read every clause. The clause about Brianna. My daughter has received her share in love and patience, and I have no further obligations to her financial ambitions. Helen read in the same calm voice she used for the rest of it, and Gloria put her hand on my arm, and I nodded once, and we moved on to the next clause. There was no anger in the room. There was only the long, settled work of letting a dead woman finish saying what she had needed to say. Yesterday I sat in the workshop apartment with the cedar box on my knees. I do not live there anymore, but I go back once a month to check on Stanislaw, to sit in the leather chair, to be in the room my wife had prepared for me before she knew I would need it. I opened the box. The cedar smell came out of it the way it always does. The smell that is the same as her hope chest, the same as her wedding dress, the same as the blanket she crocheted, the same as every important thing she ever wanted to protect. I took out the handwritten note. I read it for what must have been the 100th time. She asked me to change the beneficiary 3 times while I was sick. I said yes each time, and I changed it back each time. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you what our daughter is. I pressed the note against my chest. The cardinal landed on the fire escape outside the window. And I said out loud, into the empty apartment that smelled of cedar and old electrical work, and the coffee I'd brewed an hour earlier, I said, you knew, and you still loved her, and you still saved me. And then I said, thank you. And then I said, I am still here. I used to think the people who loved you most were the people who showed up when you were grieving. I was wrong. The people who love you most are the people who prepared for your grief before they had to. There is a difference between love and trust, and I did not know the difference for 48 years of my life. Love is what you feel. Trust is what you build. My daughter had my love. She did not earn my trust, and I gave it to her anyway because she was my daughter. And that was the lesson I had to learn in the most expensive way a man can learn it. I learned it. I will not unlearn it. And the second thing I learned is this. A person who loves you well from beyond death loved you better than most living people ever will. Renata loved me from a place she could not reach me from, and her love reached me anyway, because she did the work of preparing it while she still had hands. That is the kind of love I want to give now. To the people who are still here. The Sunday visits to Petersburg, the Saturday shifts with Ray, the good coffee with Gloria on Tuesdays at the diner on Broad Street, the slow, careful work of being someone the people I love can count on. So that's the story. 1 cedar box, 1 handwritten note, and 1 cardinal on a fire escape. Those are the 3 things I carry from all of this. If you have ever been the person who got loved better by someone who is gone than by someone who is here, drop the word cedar in the comments, and I'll know what you mean. If this story sat down inside you and made itself at home, hit that subscribe button so the next one finds you when you need it. Take care of the people who prepare for your grief. Take care of